We're back. I'm exhausted. Kill me. So the whole premise of Little Witch Academia is magic and fantasy having to coexist in the modern world, and thus we come to dragons. Dragons historically hoard gold that they steal from the peasants and sit on it doing nothing with it, and yet constantly demanding more and more and more from the increasingly destitute people. So how do you translate dragons and hoarding gold in the modern world? Oh yeah, capitalism. The entire episode's premise is a dragon who owns many corporate investments exploiting money out of Luna Nova through a non-existent clause in a contract nobody except Diana can read. He flat out lies about the conditions of a loan to rip more money out of an already struggling school for seemingly little more than greed. Considering this series was kickstarted, I'm wondering if Trigger is venting a little frustration with their entire industry. It's hard to create a thesis about school days without acknowledging the underlying problem with the concept of friendship lessons. Twilight's skill as a teacher has been called into question since season 6, and her skill as a teacher is a direct reflection of the philosophy of the writers. And the writers seem to have a warped idea of how relationships work, particularly reflected in their attitude toward redemption. You remember when the controversy about Toon Critic was blowing up and Dr. Wolf, Josh, and Silverquill tried to push the idea that Zack's victims should forgive him because holding a grudge is like drinking poison? We all rightfully hammered them for that because it was an inherently toxic lesson, because grudges, anger, and forgiveness don't work the way these three of them have deluded themselves into thinking they do. Fortunately, this was all being said to an audience of teenagers and adults, who for the most part knew better. The only ones who bought their shit did so out of performative rationality, abiding their nonsense because they wanted to appear more reasonable than those getting angry. The reason I bring this up is because this is what Friendship is Magic has been pushing for 4 years now to children who don't know better, and nobody except me has batted an eye. And this is why the premise of a school of friendship doesn't sit well with me, because it casts an air of authority on the writers who have showcased themselves to be socially maladjusted at best and nefariously conservative at worst. I simply don't trust the people who wrote Newbie Dash and Parental Guidance, especially considering that their most egregious offense in all of this is currently sitting in the position of school guidance counselor. Additionally, the attempt to shift villainy onto Chancellor Naysay through thinly veiled racism is laughably pathetic. While Friendship is Magic has covered racism in the past, it's never before been this cartoonishly overt, with Chancellor Naysay explicitly and repeatedly positing an America for Equestria First mentality over and over and over again. I bring this up because aside from that, Naysay's only role is challenging the teaching methods of a school teacher who in the past has repeatedly demonstrated poor treatment of children, questionable teaching methods, a massive tendency for double standards and holding grudges, callousness when solving problems, willingness to disregard other people's feelings or take credit for other people's work, and lacks experience and formal training as a teacher or child caregiver. Twilight is the vessel that the writers use to push most of their ideals onto kids, and because their ideals are often self-contradictory and detached from reality, it puts Twilight into a very precarious position. Having the only person to even remotely question her capabilities be handwaved like this gives strong echoes to Fame and Misfortune, where the writers try to paint those criticizing their handling of Friendship is Magic's themes as nefarious cultists who dress like Ming the Merciless, sit in the dark shadows as they manage the education system, and just for good measure share a voice actor with a mouse that's bent on world domination. Also, education standards exist for a reason, you fucking idiots. I'll just level with you, this is the entire premise of the episode.
But I was busy thinking about boys.
A bunch of guys visit Luna Nova at the behest of some anti-magic weirdo, and all the girls start fawning over them. Well, except for Susie and Diet Sunset, and I find it weird that both the best and worst character are spared this embarrassment. Anyway, Akko turns herself and some guy into furries and then has to go look for a big fountain to reverse it for some reason. Anyway, Akko's attempt to shortcut her way to the top obviously fails, and then everything goes back to normal anyway, and... what was the point of this again? I get it, Akko wants to be the very best like no one ever was, but she's too much of a scrub to actually do that. I find myself more exhausted with Akko's usual cloying for power after coming off the amazing Sleeping Susie, which was everything Little Witch Academia promised it would be and more. Going from that right back to the usual crap is just kinda disappointing. I've heard rumblings that the fandom doesn't like Mudbriar because he's overly nitpicky and makes constant corrections over inconsequential things, making him come across as arrogant and petty. And it's no surprise that among bronies, those traits have a habit of driving them up the wall and rending their garments in anger. Of course, I don't have that problem because I'm not a sulky little bitch, so I found Mudbriar to be an interesting read. Granted, that is mostly because he's basically Sheldon on 4 legs and I love my science son more than life itself, but in general, I like how he throws a wrench into Pinky's usual hyperactive mannerisms. It's like someone took Rock Solid Friendship and thought, hey, what if this episode didn't have Pinky try to kill her sister, and also had Maud paired with a character that's actually enjoyable to be around? I also like how Pinky's other sisters seem to low-key hate her guts and that Maud is the only one who can stand her exuberance. Look, Sketchy, it's your kindred spirits! We all live in a giant fucking fish. Giant fucking fish. Giant fucking fish. Okay, first of all, why is there a goldfish teaching at Luna Nova? And second of all, actually, no, I think we're gonna stop there. So in about 7 episodes, there's this entire storyline about merging technology with magic and some mystery about the shiny rod and its 7 speed settings, but I wanna know about that fucking fish. Sometimes I keep forgetting that the writers of Friendship is Magic are old, and then things like Hipster Shy happen, and I'm reminded that most of them are in their 40s. Fake It Till You Make It is one of those just for fun episodes that are likely to be derided as filler by idiots at the end of the season, like Secrets and Pies was in season 7, which on reflection I really should have put on the top 5 best episodes. It's a half hour of watching Fluttershy be just the most. You can't really go wrong with Fluttershy being the most. Aw, this was just genuinely heartwarming and sweet. What do you want from me? This wasn't exactly an eventful month. Okay, so I actually had a really philosophical take on this episode in regards to how we tend to restrict the elderly in order to prolong their lives, and that has the trade-off of reducing the quality of life overall. But recent events in my personal life has meant it's unwise to deliver such a take. Beyond that, it's mostly just a Rainbow Fucks Up episode, and I'm kinda upset that circumstances have made me lost this opportunity. I mean, Rainbow Fucks Up episodes are still fun. They're like the 3rd best kind of episode. Honestly, I'm not going to talk about Sisters itself, and since this is like the last bonus in a minute we're doing, I want to talk about Teen Titans as a whole. Teen Titans is honestly an interesting case study in recent years, as it seems a lot of diehard fans have never actually watched it. When Teen Titans Go aired and was clearly a cartoonish comedy centered around superheroes acting like twats, a lot of 90s kids started whining that all the very serious drama was being sucked out of the series to make way for kiddie comedy. Of course, when Teen Titans itself first aired, it got the exact same complaint, that it was removing all the very serious and dark drama from the comics, replacing it with a more anime-esque art style and making broad sweeping changes, like turning Starfire and Raven into actual characters instead of differently themed TNA. The original Teen Titans series was always the more comedic, lighthearted work in the DC universe. It was the Teen Titans Go and Thundercats Roar of its era. That's why people loved it so much and why it was always considerably more popular than the increasingly dark, brooding DC property surrounding it. When people talk about the original Teen Titans being this meaningful, dramatic thing that covered serious and dark subjects and tackled mature themes, I call bullshit. There are maybe 10 episodes that do that, and they're all 2-part events. I've always said that Teen Titans was overrated, and the reason that's the case is that most of its fans don't seem to remember what actually happened in the series. If you hate Teen Titans Go for being silly, stupid, and mean-spirited compared to the original, I got some really bad news for you. RIP, comment section.